Hey everybody, it's Chris, and in this video I am going to be talking about the Moonbeam spell and a little interaction that we found in the group I'm playing in that makes it very, very powerful. In my last video, I was talking about another druid spell, Conjure Animals, and why I think it is also really powerful. But of course, you have to wait till 5th level till you get Conjure Animals. And I do think Moonbeam continues to be powerful after you get to 5th level, and there is definitely some cases where you would want to cast it over Conjure Animals. And I am going to talk about a specific interaction today where I think that there's a very obvious reason why you would cast it over Conjure Animals. So here's the Moonbeam spell, and it is vastly improved from the 2014 version. It is a 2nd level evocation available to druids. Casting time is an action, range 120 feet, has all the components, lasts up to a minute using your concentration. So it says, a silvery beam of pale light shines down in a 5-foot radius. So 5-foot radius means it'll be 10 by 10 on a 2-dimensional battle map. It's 40 feet high, centered on a point within range. And it says, until the spell ends, dim light fills the cylinder, and you can take a magic action on later turns to move the cylinder up to 60 feet. Now, in the case of, I'm going to compare to Conjure Animals here. In the case of Conjure Animals, we can move the spirit animals just whenever we move. There's no action required. Here it's saying we are going to need to use our magic action to move the Moonbeam, and I would expect we're going to want to move the Moonbeam a lot. So that means that in a combat, we could expect to be using our action pretty much every round just to move the Moonbeam. And that means it is not going to be superior to Conjure Animals in a whole lot of situations, but I am going to show you one where it definitely is. So it says, when the cylinder appears, each creature in it makes a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 2d10 radiant damage. So right away, soon as you cast the spell, creatures take damage. This is an improvement over the 2014 version where they didn't take damage until the start of their next turn. And it says, and if the creature is shapeshifted as a result of polymorph spell, for example, it reverts to its true form and can't shapeshift until it leaves the cylinder. And this is a minor benefit of the spell. I mean, if you happen to be coming across shapeshifters, it might be useful. But in most combats, I would expect this is not going to come up. Then it says, on a successful save, they take half as much damage only. So that means that if they are a shapeshifter and they make their save, they don't have to revert to their true form, if that matters. Main thing is, if they make their save, they still take half damage. And that is different than Conjure Animals. With Conjure Animals, they take no damage if they make their saving throw. Now, this one is a Constitution saving throw. Constitution is generally considered a worse save to target than Dexterity, though with the 2024 Monster Manual, fewer creatures are proficient in Constitution. That means that we have trained ourselves over 10 years to consider Constitution to be a terrible save to target. That is no longer the case. Constitution is actually fairly close in line with the other saves now. One thing the designers apparently have done is they've kind of narrowed the saves that you target in terms of effectiveness, with the exceptions of Charisma and Intelligence. In fact, Intelligence is a better save to target than it has ever been before. So if you can target Intelligence, definitely do that. But Constitution isn't terrible anymore. It's an okay save to target. It says a creature makes a save only once per turn, so you can only deliver the damage once per turn, but you can absolutely deliver it more than once per round, which is the case with many of these spells. And then it says, using a higher level spell slot, the damage increases by a d10 for each spell slot level above 2. And just like with Conjure Animals, this is very easy to remember because this is a 2nd level spell that does 2d10 radiant damage. And if we cast it with a 5th level spell, it's 5d10. 7th level spell, it's 7d10. Easy to remember. Okay, so why would we want to cast Moonbeam even at higher levels? And I'm going to show you an example. So this is a combination that I have already used in actual gameplay in an ongoing campaign. So in one of the campaigns I'm playing in, I am playing with a druid, and I am a wizard. And I have done a build for the wizard, which I will link up above, just as I did in my last video. But we are going to be concentrating primarily on a bit of teamwork between the druid and the wizard. So here we have a room, and the druid has just opened this door, and inside the room we see an enemy. And let's say this is a really tough enemy. Well, we could cast Conjure Animals and do damage potentially up to 3d10 per round to this enemy, but in this case, Moonbeam might be the perfect answer. So let's say the initiative comes up, and the druid's going to go, and then the wizard's going to go, and then this big bad enemy is going to go. Or maybe the big bad enemy has already gone, and now it's our turn. So here's what we can do. The druid casts Moonbeam, and they can just cast it in the room. Ideally, they're going to want to cast it right on the enemy. Enemy makes a saving throw, and they're going to take damage, either full damage or half damage. Then, with their movement, the druid wants to get out of there. Then, on their turn, the wizard is going to move up to the door, and then they're going to use their interaction to close the door, and then they are going to cast Arcane Lock. Arcane Lock is an action to cast, lasts until dispelled. You touch a closed door, window, gate, container, or hatch, and magically lock it for the duration, which is until dispelled, so it lasts potentially forever. This lock can't be unlocked by any non-magical means. That means this lock cannot be picked. You and any creatures you designate when you cast a spell can open and close the object despite the lock, so we don't have any problems going in or out. You can also set a password that, when spoken within 5 feet of the object, unlocks it for 1 minute, and that's it. That's the Arcane Lock spell. So our wizard has cast Arcane Lock on this door, and then they can move away. And then what do we want to do? Well, we can't see in the room anymore, so presumably on its turn, this creature is going to get the heck out of this Moonbeam. And what do we do on our turn? Well, the wizard doesn't have to do anything, but here's what the druid does. You can take a magic action on later turns to move the cylinder up to 60 feet. Now, presumably, we've got no idea where this enemy is in this room. We can guess they're probably not in the Moonbeam, but we don't know that for sure. So let's just remove them from the map entirely. So we know where the Moonbeam is, but we don't know where the enemy is. Well, here's what the druid can do. They can move the Moonbeam up to 60 feet. So they're going to move it 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. Now, no matter where the enemy is in this room, we have moved the Moonbeam into their space. It says a creature also makes a save when the spell's area moves into its space. So guess what we do on the next round? 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50. We don't even need to use the full movement. Of course, in a bigger room, you would use a little bit more movement. But basically, for a minute, we're just going to move this thing around and around and around, and it doesn't matter where the enemy goes. As long as they're within the room, this Moonbeam is going to move into their space every single round. And we don't need to, unlike with Conjure Animals, we do not need to see the enemy for them to take damage. With Conjure Animals, you have to see the enemy for them to take damage. Not the case with Moonbeam. And we can move the Moonbeam without seeing where we're going to move it to. That's another change from Conjure Animals. In Conjure Animals, you can move it to an unoccupied space you can see. But with Moonbeam, no such thing. You just move it 60 feet. So we're just going to move it 60 feet or even less than 60 feet every turn. And then it is definitely going to move into the enemy space. They are going to have to make a saving throw. Presumably, they're going to move out of it on their turn. Doesn't matter. We're going to hit them the next turn, and the turn after that, and the turn after that for 10 rounds. With a second level casting, that is 20d10, save for half, right? They'll probably take 15d10 approximately over the duration. And if we upcast it, of course, with a 4th level spell, it would be twice as much, 40d10. Now, that doesn't mean there's no way that this enemy could survive. If the enemy has Dispel Magic, they could cast Dispel Magic on this thing. If the enemy has the ability to teleport somewhere that it cannot see, then it could potentially teleport out of the room. Though I would point out that most creatures have a limitation on that where they have to be able to see their destination. This also isn't going to work on just any room. If there is a hallway or a doorway leading out of this room, this creature could potentially escape this room. I mean, technically speaking, that doesn't mean they win the combat, but at least they would escape. So there is that as well. But in a case like this, where we have an enclosed space, that creature, unless they have Dispel Magic or the ability to teleport somewhere they cannot see, they're basically screwed. Now, the 2014 version of Moonbeam didn't work like this. If you moved the Moonbeam into the enemy space, they didn't take damage right away. So this strategy wouldn't have worked in 2014. But now with the 2024 rules, where the Moonbeam basically just moves along, rah, and everything in its path is getting hit with it, it has become a very effective spell, and it is also equally as effective, or even more effective, if there's more than one enemy, because we're hitting all of them every single turn with this effect. So, I talked a little bit about, the conjure animals being a bit like a drone that we're moving around. Moonbeam even more so, because we do not need to see the location at all. And we can be behind full cover as long as we have already cast the spell. That is not an issue. So, yeah, Moonbeam, very effective spell in 2024. Druids looking so good with their spell list in 2024. I mean, if you want to play a Moon Druids look good, and I'm going to go more into detail on Moon Druids very soon. But Moonbeam is effective whether you are a Moon Druid or a Land Druid or a Sea Druid or whatever kind of Druid you are, especially if you can set up this kind of scenario. So I thought I would go over it in this video. Let me know if you've had any nice experiences with the new Moonbeam in the 2024 rules. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon.